She is the 12th chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and as such, she is not only the first Native American, but also only the second woman appointed to this important and prestigious position. Shelley previously served on the National Council for the Humanities for 6 years and was appointed by President Obama. Chair Low received her bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Arizona. She received her Master's of Arts degree in American Indian Studies and has completed coursework for her doctoral degree in higher education from the University of Arizona. Chair Low's career in higher education also includes serving as Assistant Dean in the Dean's Office at Yale University, Director of the Native American Cultural Center at Yale, and as Program Facilitator for the American Indian Studies Center program at the University of Arizona. Ms. Low has had several leadership roles. Some of these include serving on the governing board for the University of Arizona Alumni Association, a challenge leadership group for the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Solve Indigenous Communities Fellowship. She's been a trustee for the National Museum of the American Indians and the governing board for the National Indian Education Center. The Native people of this nation are thrilled to have such a leader in the higher levels of government. We look forward to her good works that she will accomplish in this historically significant position. In the not too distant future, I look forward to being an octogenarian. So, there was a time when I went in college, there were only about 50 Native students at the University of Oklahoma. And now, there's thousands. So it's just such a pleasure to see all of the things that are happening now and all the wonderfully educated people that we have. And I just think that this has been a long day coming. And we're all excited about the future and know that with our now in these national and strategic leadership positions, we know that our Native leaders are going to do great. And Shelley is one of those, along with Secretary Holland, and we're just support you in every way we can and want to thank you and congratulate you and thank you for joining us. Please join me in welcoming Shelley Low.
Shelley Low Yanisha, Belagana Nishle, Nanastasia Tachini Bashi, Belagana Dashike, the Traba Dashnale, Locantiel de Nasha, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Shagan. Hello, everybody. And, I'm just going to say it right now. It's so hard to be sitting here in Albuquerque an hour away and not sitting there having lunch with you. But I'll talk a little bit more about why we're sitting here and not with you. But I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you, Della, for your introduction and also for getting on my calendar very early on. Della was one of the first people after I was nominated who emailed and said, we're doing this event, can you come? And I passed it along to the staff. We were able to make it work out. A very special thanks to Lucy for the poems that she shared today. And I actually want to thank Lucy for all of her poems. And I want to note that these poems convey the power of the humanities, of putting cultural strength and understanding into words that we may continually turn to, whether in times of celebration and joy, or in times of sorrow and need. I know I find strength every time I hear Lucy or Ophelia or Joy or any of our Indigenous poets. When I hear them read, or when I pick up one of their many books of poetry and I read either to myself or with my children. I also want to give a very special thanks to my colleague Daryl for his presentation and for the important work he is doing. And a big shout out to my NEH colleagues who are joining virtually from also here in Albuquerque and also from Washington, DC. A special thanks to Peggy Maynor and the Cultural Resource Fund, the microgroup, for their research and work organizing today's event, which brings us together to discuss a topic I know matters so much to all of us, the importance of supporting and revitalizing Indigenous languages and their role in fostering community identity and healing. I was very, very excited to learn that I would be traveling to Santa Fe for this event and that a number of the NEH staff would be joining me. And we were all very, very saddened last week when we were advised by FEMA not to travel into the Santa Fe area so as not to burden any resources that might be needed in the coming days for individuals who have had to evacuate their homes due to the fire. So as I begin, I want to acknowledge all the communities around Las Vegas, Santa Fe, and other parts of New Mexico who are coping with terrible losses and threats to personal safety due to the ongoing wildfires in the region. In addition to threatening homes and livelihoods, these fires also imperil our cultural heritage and the natural environment in which so much of our history is rooted. As you know, the Biden-Harris administration has authorized federal aid to assist recovery efforts. And at NEH, we are working closely with our state partner, the New Mexico Humanities Council, to disperse emergency funding to assist cultural and educational groups and programs affected by these disasters. And we continue to think about them every day. I'd like to begin today's conversation by reflecting on some beautiful words by our recent U.S. Poet Laureate, Joy Harjo of the Muskogee Creek Nation. In her poem, Perhaps the World Ends Here, she writes, "The world begins at a kitchen table. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women." When I think of the humanities, I think of these words, the instructions on what it means to be human. Words that we absorb from our earliest days, often most memorably from those conversations around the kitchen table. Throughout our lives, we continue to grow and refine that knowledge with each new generation encounter, with each new generation, each new experience, encounter, or discovery. But the foundations of who we are and how we understand the world are laid out in our homes, often at the kitchen table. They are the stories and teachings passed down to us from parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, neighbors and friends, stories that inform how we live, how we interact with each other, how we interact with the natural world, and the decisions we make. They are the ideas that illuminate our understandings of our place in the world, and the ideals that shape the values that guide us. And the channel for transmitting all of this cultural knowledge from generation to generation is in the languages we use. As many of you know, I grew up on the Navajo Reservation in rural Northeast Arizona, and the history, traditions, and values I carry with me were formed there. Although I absorbed plenty of Navajo culture around the kitchen table and at church and at school, and from the many families that were part of my community in the town of Ganado, Arizona, I remain a lifelong and continuing Navajo language learner. While my parents' generation grew up hearing Navajo spoken at home by elders, my generation, there was an emphasis on education, which meant speaking English and only English, both at school and at home. The Navajo I heard as a child came through listening to conversations among grandparents or in the words of prayers and hymns at church. It was not until I left Ganado for the University of Arizona that I had the opportunity to formally study the Navajo language. And yet, compared to so many other tribes, the Navajo Nation is fortunate in that we still have speakers for whom Navajo is their first language. On this continent, the history of Indigenous languages is one of erasure and loss, both through episodes of brute force and through slow erosion. Tribal groups across the country continue to feel the long-lasting impact of forced removal from their homelands, laws prohibiting the use and teaching of Native languages, and the forced assimilation of Indigenous children at Native American boarding schools. In many communities, our elders are the only remaining Native speakers of tribal languages, and younger generations may still feel as though they need to leave behind their Native culture in order to seek economic and educational opportunity. When we lose a language, we lose all the knowledge, history, and values of that culture that are embedded in that language. Our languages are rooted in the places we call home and our identity as a community. The product of the ideas and experiences of generations after generations of our ancestors, languages are living things and carry in them the spirit of our peoples. I know that many Indigenous words have no equivalent in English, because the belief and ideas they express come from an entirely different tradition and way of thinking about the world. One of the things that's always amazed me is the number of Tlingit words and phrases for different kinds of snow. Having grown up in Arizona where it does snow, well, at least it used to snow, I only knew snow as a single thing. Something, of course, I think about much more often now that I have to dig out my car from snowstorms in Boston. But in Tlingit, every gradation and granular distinction has meaning and direct impact on daily lives and livelihood. From powder to sludge, it can determine what the day's conditions for hunting will be, which trails and roadways are safe to cross. In my previous position as executive director of the Harvard University Native American Program, we assisted with a welcoming event for our newly hired Anishinaabe faculty member, Shawin Canoe. The event included local tribal members and Native students, and Dr. Canoe's uncle flew down from Canada to give a traditional prayer and smudging ceremony. In order to do the event properly, a few of the Anishinaabe tribal artifacts in the Peabody Museum at Harvard were needed. The objects involved were ceremonial items, a bowl and a spoon, that Professor Canoe knew very well. She told the museum's curators that these items had been crafted and endowed with the energy of everyone who had handled them so that they could be used. And that by sitting in the archives, the museum was not allowing these items to fulfill their intended purpose. She worked closely with the museum staff to secure permission to use these objects in her event. And in the end, the museum staff brought the bowl and the spoon out from the museum, and in their special white curator's gloves, they took them out of their boxes and they handed them over to the bare hands of Professor Canoe and her uncle, who used the objects in the traditional manner they were created for. You could tell that it was a nerve-wracking event for many of the museum curatorial staff. However, by putting these objects to their intended use and allowing them to serve their purpose, we were reawakening the spirit they had been infused with, and in turn, we were able to feed the spirit of each of them and be fed in return. The same is true of our languages. We cannot allow something so essential to our cultural heritage and identity to become dormant or lost, to sit on a shelf or in a drawer. Language is meant to be a living thing, something to cherish and honor through use. We feed the spirit of our languages when we use them and pass them along for use by our children. I'm happy to note that efforts to revitalize our languages are gaining strength across the country. Now, in public schools on and around the Navajo Reservation, students can take courses in Navajo language, history, and government. And a growing number of state universities across the country offer Native language instruction. Work being done by groups such as this is helping us hold on to the knowledge of our elders and make it possible for children to hear and learn heritage languages at a young age. As NEH chair, my priority is to expand opportunities for all Americans to participate and benefit from humanities-based research, education, preservation, and public programs, and to make sure that the agency's grant programs and the projects we fund reflect the full and rich diversity of this country's histories, voices, experiences, and cultures. To help achieve these goals, we are creating an NEH Office of Data and Evaluation that will be responsible for capturing information on who applies to and receives NEH grants, and will analyze the reach of NEH-funded projects and products. We are also creating a new Office of Outreach to build and strengthen relationships with new and historically underserved communities and institutions, including tribal nations and organizations that have traditionally had less success in applying for NEH funding. NEH funds numerous initiatives that support the documentation, preservation, and revitalization of Native languages. Through a 17-year partnership with the National Science Foundation, NEH and NSF's Documenting Endangered Languages Grant Program funds linguistics fieldwork, research and analysis, and the preparation of materials on the thousands of languages across the globe at risk of loss. Through that program, NEH has funded the creation of a Penobscot dictionary, the documentation of dialects spoken by different communities of Mississippi Choctaw, and the development of a Hawaiian spoken language repository, among many other projects. This program is also helping save and reclaim some of the cultural knowledge encoded in Indigenous languages, such as projects serving Nahuatl and Totonac communities in Mexico about their knowledge and use of local plant life in cooking and medicine. This project is producing both materials to help in the revitalization of those tribal languages, while also preserving traditional ethnobotanical knowledge for scientists. NEH has also partnered with the First Nations Development Institute in Colorado to provide financial support to approximately 40 native language immersion programs across the country. This initiative has helped strengthen tribal-led language programs, transmitting language and culture to new generations of Nez Perce, Salish, Crow, Lakota, Ojibwe, and Native Hawaiian speakers. Going forward, we hope our new Office of Data and Evaluation will analyze these programs to help identify best practices and to determine how best NEH can invest in effective language revitalization approaches. In this, we will also be guided by our friend, colleague, and recognized genius, Daryl Baldwin, who was recently appointed to NEH's Advisory Council. And of course, NEH grants also help Indigenous groups preserve their cultural heritage and share their stories with the American public. Through a partnership with the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, NEH distributed $3.6 million in American Rescue Plan recovering funding to 84 Native cultural organizations, including language programs, tribal preservation offices, community centers, and museums across 25 states to help them retain staff and maintain programs to preserve and bring awareness to Native American cultural heritage. An NEH education grant to Nebraska Indian Community College is supporting a curriculum initiative based on the work of Native American ethnologist Francis LaFlesche, and a grant to Little Bighorn College is supporting the collection of oral histories of the post-World War II generation of Crow tribal members for use in humanities courses. NEH infrastructure grants are enabling the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians in Oregon to construct a tribal museum and cultural center, and preservation grants to the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma and the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation in Connecticut are helping those nations preserve and curate collections of importance to community history. Other NEH funding supports collaboration between tribes and Native historians and researchers and large institutions to help educate the broader public about Native history, such as an NEH-funded permanent exhibition at the Heard Museum in Phoenix on the history and legacy of American Indian boarding schools that has been adapted into a traveling exhibition that will be displayed in small communities in all 50 states through 2025. Locally in Santa Fe, an NEH grant to the New Mexico History Museum is supporting development of an exhibition on the history of Indigenous voting rights in the state, timed to mark the 75th anniversary in 2023 of the Trujillo v. Garley court case, in which World War II veteran Miguel Trujillo of Isleta Pueblo successfully sued the state of New Mexico for his right to vote. Over my time as NEH chair, I look forward to working closely with tribal groups and institutions to make sure that Indigenous voices and stories are heard, and that the languages they belong to remain living spoken languages, able to fulfill their purpose. I would like to circle back to some of Lucy's powerful words, which she just recited and which I was reminded of this past weekend when I opened my cousin's newly published book. The first words you read in the book right after the title page come from Lucy and help guide our work moving forward. Lucy tells us, we must remember the worlds our ancestors traveled, always wear the songs they gave us. Remember we are made of prayers. Now we leave wrapped in blankets of love and wisdom. I will move forward today and in the days that follow, strengthened by the love and wisdom of everyone here today. And I thank you for your dedication and collaboration and for inviting me to join you.